Zimbabwean government says it will start paying compensation to farmers who lost land under former President Robert Mugabe's administration. The funds will be paid in installments, with the first one to go out before the end of October. The government says this is part of a broader effort to revive the country's agricultural sector.
Zimbabwe is down bad, and let me explain. Zimbabwe, which was formerly Rhodesia, is a country founded by Cecil Rhodes, a white British guy who came from England and was doing a whole bunch of shady stuff. He actually is the same person that the Rhodes Scholar was named after, and no black man or woman should ever accept this award because of who Cecil Rhodes is and how much he hated black people. We also know that in Zimbabwe, Africans there suffered the same torture, if not worse, as those nearby in South Africa. They also were subject to segregation and could not even vote in their own country. We already know what happened. Now, ZANU-PF, which was ran by Robert Mugabe and many others, they had a civil war. They beat out Ian Smith and the whites and got them out of power. In 1980 is when Mugabe and his staff renamed that country to Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe was doing pretty good for some time. Mugabe turned up the literacy rate there for a lot of the blacks, and Zimbabwe was on the up and up. But the problem was that at a certain point, the economy started to crash down and things were not going as well, okay? Now, the whites still had their land after 1980. It wasn't that the whites was not there, they just was not in power, but they still had their land. Even Ian Smith, when he passed away, he had probably one of the biggest farms in the country, but because of Robert Mugabe's reforms and some of the borrowings and things that he was doing, not running the country right, wasn't going right, a lot of the people that were in Zimbabwe were upset about the way that things were going because the whites were still rich. And Mugabe, he was not so popular in the country anymore. So to deter him from just leaving power, he was like, well, listen, what do y'all really want to do? And so what the blacks wanted to do was to take back their land from the white farmers. And I get it, because this is your land. This is your country. They came from somewhere else and they should go back. I get it. Understandable. So Mugabe allows this to happen so he could stay in power. So the blacks did start taking away this land and things like that without compensation. So Zimbabwe gets hit with a lot of sanctions. They can't borrow money. They can't rebuild their infrastructure. They can't do anything, right? And this is all because of the decision that, Robert Mugabe made. So you have so many talented Zimbabweans out of the country, right? And once Mugabe passed away and Emerson Mnangagwa, I think that's his name, came into power, those sanctions were still there. And they can't rebuild their country without being able to take development loans and things like that. And this is exactly what they're trying to do.
So why are they doing this? Well, quite simply, Zimbabwe is $21 billion in debt, and the only way they can get out of it is by working with the broadly Western and Nigerian aligned African Development Bank. Debt restructuring and loans from these big international financial institutions doesn't come for free, because a large reason for their entire existence is to draw rogue countries into one's spheres of influence, and thus to get help with the debt, Zimbabwe needs to implement unpalatable things like proper elections, anti-corruption courts, more transparent justice systems, and compensation to white farmers.
So they can't even get a loan from the African Development Bank, even in Nigeria. That's how bad the game is right now, okay? So Zimbabwe has agreed to paying back billions of dollars to the same whites that shouldn't have their land, but recompensating them for their land again. And Zimbabwe is saying, okay, listen, if we're gonna do that, this is what you need to do for us.
President Emerson Mnangagwa has commissioned a study on possible effects of Britain's colonialism on indigenous Zimbabweans. The sole aim is to ensure the British government pays compensation and apologizes for its past unjust actions. The Zimbabwean National Elders Forum is spearheading the program. We get more in the following report.
President Emerson Mnangagwa pledged support in seeking an apology and reparations from the former colonial rulers.
We therefore, we ask, when are the rest of us in the former colonies going to receive similar apologies from these people, the colonizers, the British? We wonder. We need it. They must apologize. The time has come for us to engage our as well former colonial power objectively and astutely, seeking the much delayed yet important post-colonial gesture of reparations, restorations, and much needed apology and reconciliation.
Now, I've seen a lot of people give commentary towards this, and they're saying things like, man, they weak. I would never do that. And the reason why I wouldn't do that, because, man, I'm a pro-black and I'm tough. I get all that, and it makes sense. But you got to understand something. And I'm not trying to say what they're doing is right. I don't agree with it. But if you understood how many people in Zimbabwe are dying each year, like 7 million people in Zimbabwe, according to some things I've read, are dying of hunger or suffer from hunger. You have hospitals in Zimbabwe that don't even have a lot of clean water, all right? So just think about not having any money to do things, and your best talent is leaving Zimbabwe. I had a call the other day on Facebook. I was trying to get something done on Facebook, and it was a brother that was in London working for Facebook with a British number. And I know the Zimbabwean accent very well because I lived in Poland. Zimbabweans are the #1 black immigrant group in Poland, beating out even Nigerians. And the reason why that is because where can they go? And so I talked to the guy. I'm like, hey man, are you from Zimbabwe? He's like, yeah, I'm from Zim. And the reality is that these people have to do what they have to do to get their country back. And the West is not going to let that ride, okay? Yes, we know that if it was the other way around, they would never let us do that. But the way that these people are feeling is, listen, man, our people are dying, our people are suffering. We have to do whatever we can do to get these sanctions off. Now, how can they do this? It is because Africa is not united and Africa is not strong enough. Basically, Zimbabwe can't get any help from any of the African countries to speak on its behalf. And again, here is some of the fundamental issues that I have with Pan-Africanism and some of the problems that we're going to see in the future, because everybody knows that Zimbabwe is taking the right position by saying, listen, this land was ours, they took it from us, they then subdued us, so we want to take back what was ours. Nobody can dispute that. But at the same time, if you're not in a position to punish those who have done that to you, then what do? Now you have to retract and think backwards and say, hey, we'll give these guys back their land, back all their stuff, but please take the sanctions off so we can basically get some funding to rebuild our country. And it's sad, when Africa has to stand up and say, listen, what happened to Zimbabwe was cruel, and you guys need to lift those sanctions up off them. But that's not what happens, okay? A lot of African countries don't stand together with each other. They stand with whoever is paying, right? You have more African countries standing with China than they should be standing with their brother. And, it's just everybody out there for themselves. And unfortunately, Zimbabwe finds itself down bad because of it. I just pray that and hope that one day it gets better. So guys, what do you think? It's your boy O'Shea Duke Jackson, back at it again with another episode here on the King Ghana channel of Fair Use. I'm out.